Okay, so I think we are recording. There we go. All right, so doing this interview for the special collections class I'm in, and we're going to be talking a little bit about your experiences with archaeology. So first off, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Hi there, I'm Jelks Cabaniss. I've been a professional field archaeologist for 5 years now. I have worked on sites including excavation and survey in uh, Tennessee, Alabama, Georgia, North Carolina, Kentucky, Montana, Wyoming, Colorado, North Dakota, South Dakota, and Scotland.
Nice. All right. So I guess first off, a little bit background. Why did you get interested in archaeology?
I think probably when I was a kid, and my brother and I found an old rifle that was laying in the grass. And from then, I guess I liked digging up old stuff and trying to figure out the story behind it. Because we never figured out the story behind that rifle, and we never will, but it makes you think.
It does. Nice. Um, So, what is your educational background? Like, where did you go to for education in archaeology?
So, my bachelor's degree is in natural resources and the environment with a minor in archaeology, and that was from Sewanee, the University of the South, which I graduated from in 2020, and then in 2024 I graduated from the University of Aberdeen with a Master of Science in archaeology.
Nice. So was there one particular aspect of archaeology when you were studying it that like really fascinated you, that really sort of drove you to like seek a specialization or anything?
I think that there were aspects of academia, particularly when reading papers and reports, that pushed me to want to become a better field archaeologist, and to basically one thing that really pushed me was to try and talk to locals and figure things out because so many times when I was reading reports of people who haven't been out in the field, they're just reading and basing it off of papers and reports of other people. They lack a lot of information, and some things that seem hidden are really simple and they're right there. And um, I think a lot of academic scholars will just gloss over talking to the locals. And I know it can cause some complications and it makes your progress a little slower, but I have found sites before because I asked the locals and they said, yeah, go over there.
Nice. Yeah, and do you think there is like a strong divide between sort of the academic and the more field-based sides of archaeology still?
I think there can be. There's definitely a conflict of, especially people who go from an undergrad directly to a master's degree and then go into the field. They often get hired in a leadership position and they don't have the experience of the people under them, and it can cause a lot of conflicts, especially if they don't really know what they're doing, but they make some bad calls. And so I think a lot of people, there is a divide, and you can't have one without the other, but yeah, there's always going to be a little bit of conflict.
So speaking of your job as an archaeologist, like what does your day-to-day actually look like? Like what are you doing?
So that depends on what region I'm in. So when I work in the southeastern United States, my day typically consists of it's a 9 hour shift. I dig a 30 centimeter wide shovel test, typically about 70 centimeters deep. Again, that's dependent on what state we're in. And quota is expected between 15 to 20 shovel tests per day, depending on your ability. I was always about 20, 25 a day was my expectation. And that's you carry your pack and you do a shovel test every 15, 30 meters, depending on the requirements. And that will also include, if you find artifacts, what we do is we get a square cut for the profile, get your soil profile, and get that all the way down to the bottom of your shovel test as well. And then every once in a while, we'd be put on larger phase 2 or 3 excavations where we might be there for a couple of weeks or even a couple months. And that could include mechanical excavation with a backhoe or a tractor, and then water screening, which we don't typically do in the field. In the field, we just use shaker screens. And then when I'm working in the Northwest region, the Rockies, there's not much excavation at all. We've done a few projects where we've dug a few holes, but for the most part, it's all pedestrian survey. And we typically work for Forest Service or BLM, and we will cover several thousand acres in a week. Its expected quota is that you survey 80 acres per person per day.
Nice. So you talk a little bit about how, you could have some of these people coming out of, straight from a master's degree into the field without having any experience and being in manager positions and, having some dissatisfaction with that. But uh, do you think there's a lot of like mobility in the field in general? Like, is there room to be promoted? Is there room for like, changing where you're working, for instance?
Yes, so I have found that, and this applies to commercial as well as even government positions. It is almost impossible to continuously move up with one company. You will end up getting locked in there. And I know a guy who works for a company down in Alabama, and he's been there for 15 years. And because of that, he is always the last person to get his pay raise because they kind of know he's not going anywhere. And especially since field archaeology is an incredibly mobile job, I typically move hotels once a week when I'm working or every 2 weeks. And so it pays to be really mobile, and that can include going to a different company. And that's how you stay on top of wages. And then when you do that, if you are a good employee, those companies will start to try to pressure you to become more full-time. And so that is your promotion, but you need to pick it right. And yeah, I'd say just moving between companies is the best way to stay competitive.
That's okay. Let's see my questions here. So I guess going off of that, if someone were to talk to you and say they were interested in becoming an archaeologist as a profession, as to make a living, would you recommend them to do that anyway, even despite the challenges?
I would say it really depends on their mobility, their ability to handle it, because it is, firstly, it is an extremely physically demanding job. People die in the field. And just a few years ago, I was working a project, and a girl on a different crew from a different company died, not far from where we were, due to heat stroke. So if you are not fit enough to do it, you need to reach that point before you go out in the field. And especially if you're working out in places like Montana, it's exceptionally dangerous. There's not a lot of people, there's a lot of wildlife, and the terrain is rough. So make sure they're physically fit enough, physically able to do the job, and then being able to move around. And in order to really be able to save up and make money, my best advice is to live out of your car and to be as homeless as you can. Because the company will put you up in a hotel, and if you can go camp on the weekends to save costs, you'll be able to save money. But I had friends who got an apartment for, 2 grand a month in Alabama, but due to their work schedule, they only got to use that apartment 8 days out of the month. And that was a lot of their income going out. So
Yeah.
it pays to be living out of your car.
The homeless profession. Okay, so move on to the next section. More on interactions with like the wider public. So when you tell people you're an archaeologist, what's sort of the general reaction you get from people?
Most people, their first reaction is, "Wow, I've never met another met an archaeologist before," and some of them don't believe it's a real job. The second most common thing is people asking if I found any dinosaurs, um, which, yeah, it didn't used to bother me, but after about the millionth time, kind of gets to you. But no, most people are pretty excited, and they want to know what sites I've worked on. And there, it's always a question of what's the coolest thing you found, or something like that, or just what's up. And yeah, I don't know. Most people are really just curious and interested, and a ton of people will try and point you to things, which can be really helpful. For instance, when I was working a project in Wyoming, we were working on Battle Mountain and found a really large lithic site, and we were just talking with locals, and they were like, "Oh, well, do you know why that's called Battle Mountain?" And we said, "No." And they said, "Well, when the white fur trappers came in and moved up there, they had a large fight with the native populations. And we never would have known that if we hadn't just talked to these locals and they were like, oh, yeah, the history's kind of cool. And they were just interested in it. Pretty sure we found the staging site of that battle due to the lithic scatter.
Nice. Impressive. Yeah, I guess going off of that, what's the most like interesting like tip or question or, interaction you've had with a non-archaeologist in terms of archaeology?
I've had, well, when I was in Scotland, I found what I believe to be an unrecorded Viking grave site on an island in the Shetland Islands. And I was talking about it at the local bar when I returned to the university. And one of the bartenders who I was friends with, he said, I'm from that island, and my mom has been looking for the Viking site there. And I was like, really? And he said, yeah, she's pretty sure she knows where the Longhouse site is on that island, which is, of course,
Interesting.
never recorded. There are no Viking sites recorded anywhere on the island. And so that was really exciting to just be like, oh, I could actually find a pretty large scale site that's hidden in plain sight.
Nice. Yeah, it's crazy. Let's see. If you had one thing to tell like just non-archaeologists in general about archaeology, if you had to pick one thing, what would it be?
Um, if you find something in the woods and it's on property that you do not own, please don't pick it up. Just leave it be. You can take photos, that's fine, but please leave it be.
All right, nice, thanks. Okay, let me just go over my questions here, see if there's some other things. Uh, is there anything you would want to change about the way that archaeology is taught, or that the way the like professional field of archaeology is run?
Um, I would say that there should be a change reflected in working in archaeology, the fact that it is considered unskilled labor, yet requires a 4-year degree to get in the door, is pretty absurd. And especially, we go to very blue collar areas, and almost all of those blue collar trade working people are making 2 to 3 times what we're making. And we're doing manual labor too. And so there is that aspect. And when it comes to teaching, I think that I can't really say for the whole, but a lot of the times there's a focus to push your writing, your academia in a certain direction or a slant that is more favorable to getting um, published, which
Right.
leads to repetition. And so when I researched Viking women, I got thousands of articles all written about one female warrior in a grave. It didn't talk about any other women. It was just talking about rewriting the gender norms as they were seen. So I couldn't actually find out anything about Viking women, just about that this one woman was a warrior. And so that just bottlenecks actual science and learning.
All right, thank you. Okay, so I think that basically covers my questions. I want to thank you for agreeing to this interview, and yeah, any last messages or anything?
Nope, I guess stay dirty.
All right, thanks.